Hello, everybody. Well, if you've been with me since the first chapter of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we are now at the end. We are on chapters 29 and 30, and that will end the book. If you're like me and you read great books more than once, God knows I've read so many books more than once, series more than once. If you read Harry Potter, I've read it a number of times. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I've read it umpteen times. And some people say, well, if you've already read it, why would you read it again? Because it's a new experience every time. Yes, you know what's happening. Yes, you know what's coming. But it's just like other things. You experience, you become invested in characters. You get to love characters. You feel for them. You're walking through this adventure with them in the story. And you want to visit them again. You want to go back and see. You want to get back into that world. I wanted to go back to the Chocolate Factory. That's why I chose this book to read to you this time. I missed it. You see things too in a book that you've read more than once. You see things, experience things that you, for whatever reason, you didn't see before. You notice things. It's just like in a movie. If you watch a movie more than once, you'll see things that perhaps you missed before. Who knows? But it makes it wonderful, and you experience and you fall in love all over again with the characters in the books that you love, whether they're single books or series. It doesn't matter. But we are on the last two chapters, and I always get melancholy and I always get sad when it comes to the end of a great book, because it's saying so long, it's closing the book, so to speak, and saying so long to these characters that we hopefully have become invested in. And it's a leaving of one and moving on to another, and that's a good thing. But there's always a bittersweet kind of melancholy feeling to it. So chapter 29 is The Other Children Go Home, is what that's called. "We must go down and take a look at our little friends before we do anything else," said Mr. Wonka. And he pressed a different button, and the elevator dropped lower, and soon it was hovering just above the entrance to the factory. Looking down now, Charlie could see the children and their parents standing in a little group just inside the gates. "Mr. Wonka, I can only count 3. Who's missing?" "Well, I expect it's Mike TV," Mr. Wonka said. "But he'll be coming along soon. Do you see the trucks?" Mr. Wonka pointed to a line of gigantic covered vans parked in a line nearby. "Yes," Charlie said. "What are they for?" "Don't you remember what it said on the golden tickets? Every child goes home with a lifetime supply of candy. There's one truckload for each of them, loaded to the brim. Aha!" Mr. Wonka went on. "There goes our friend Augustus Gloop. Do you see him? He's getting into the first truck with his mother and father." "You mean he's really all right?" asked Charlie, astonished. "Even after going up that awful pipe?" "Oh, he's very much all right," said Mr. Wonka. "He's changed," said Grandpa Joe, peering down through the glass wall of the elevator. "He used to be fat, and look at him now. He's thin as a straw." "Of course he's changed," said Mr. Wonka, laughing. "He got squeezed in that pipe. Don't you remember? And look, there goes Miss Violet Beauregard, the great gum chewer. It seems as though they've managed to dejuice her after all. I'm so glad. And how healthy she looks, much better than before." "But she's purple. Purple in the face," cried Grandpa Joe. "Well, so she is," said Mr. Wonka. "Ah, well, there's nothing we can do about that." "Good gracious," said Charlie. "Look at poor Veruca Salt and Mr. Salt and Mrs. Salt. They're simply covered in garbage." "And look, here comes Mike TV," said Grandpa Joe. "Good heavens, what have they done to him? He's about 10 feet tall and thin as a wire." "Oh, Oh, they've overstretched him on the gum-stretching machine, said Mr. Wonka. How very careless. But how dreadful for him, said Charlie. Nonsense, said Mr. Wonka. He's very lucky. Every basketball team in the country will be trying to get him. But now, he added, it is time we left these four silly children. I have something very important to talk with you about, my dear Charlie. Come. Mr. Wonka pressed another button, and the elevator swung upwards into the sky. Well, that was it. All the other children are fine. Well, they've been altered in some way, but they're going home with, as promised, a lifetime supply of chocolate. And, they've hopefully learned a lesson. In addition to being changed physically, they've hopefully learned a lesson, a little bit of a lesson, anyway. Last chapter, chapter 30. Charlie's Chocolate Factory is what that's called. Some of these, sometimes chapter titles are kind of ambiguous. They're cryptic. Those are words that we're not really sure what they mean. But in Roald Dahl's books, in this book, some of the chapters kind of nail it. They say what they are. This one's called Charlie's Chocolate Factory. I wonder. The great glass elevator was now hovering high above the town. Inside the elevator stood Mr. Wonka, Grandpa Joe, and little Charlie. Oh, how I love my chocolate factory, said Mr. Wonka, gazing down. And then he paused, and he turned around and looked at Charlie with the most serious expression on his face. Do you love it too, Charlie? He asked. Oh, yes, Charlie said. I think it's the most wonderful place in the whole world. I'm very pleased to hear you say that, Mr. Wonka said, looking more serious than ever. He went on staring at Charlie. Yes, he said, I'm very pleased indeed to hear you say that. And now I shall tell you why. Mr. Wonka cocked his head to one side, and all at once the tiny twinkling wrinkles of a smile appeared around the corners of his eyes. You see, my dear boy, I have decided to present you of the whole place. As soon as you are old enough to run it, the entire factory will become yours. Charlie stared at Mr. Wonka. Grandpa Joe opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Oh, it's quite true, said Mr. Wonka, smiling broadly now. I really am giving it to you. That is all right, isn't it? You're giving it to him? Asked Grandpa Joe. You must be joking. Oh, dear sir, I'm not joking. Oh, no, I'm not joking. But, why should you want to give it, your factory, to Charlie? Listen, said Mr. Wonka. I'm an old man, and I'm much older than you think I am. I can't go on forever. I've got no children of my own, no family at all. So who is going to run this factory when I get too old to do it myself? Someone's got to keep it going, if only for the sake of the Oompa Loompas. Mind you, there are thousands of clever men who would give anything for the chance to come in and take over for me, but I don't want that sort of person. No, I don't want a grown-up person at all. A grown-up won't listen to me. He won't learn. He will try to do things his own way, not mine. So I have a child. I must have a child. I want a good, sensible, loving child, one whom I can tell all my most precious candy-making secrets while I'm still alive. So that's why you gave out the golden tickets, cried Charlie. Exactly, my boy, said Mr. Wonka. I've decided to invite 5 children to the factory. I decided it. And the one I like the best at the end of the day would be the winner. But, Mr. Wonka, stammered Grandpa Joe, do you really and truly mean that you are giving the whole of this enormous factory to little Charlie? After all, oh, no, there's no arguments, no time for arguments, said Mr. Wonka. We must go at once and fetch the rest of your family. Charlie's father and mother and anyone else that's around. They can all live in the factory from now on. You can all help to run it until Charlie is old enough to do it by himself. Where do you live, Charlie? Charlie peered down through the glass elevator at the snow-covered houses that lay below. It's over there, he said, pointing. It's that little cottage right on the edge of the town, the little one. Now, before I finish here, I want to show you this wonderful picture of the great glass elevator floating above the town. You can see the children all here, or I should say floating above the town, floating above the factory. There's the gates, there's the kids, and they're, waiting to go out. I'd love to be in that elevator. That would be so cool. That would be so fun. That little cottage over there, Charlie said. Oh, I see it, cried Mr. Wonka, and he pressed some more buttons, and the elevator shot down toward Charlie's house. I'm afraid my mother won't come with us, Charlie said sadly. Why not? Why ever not? Because she won't leave Grandma Josephine and Grandma Georgina and Grandpa George. My dear boy, but they must come too. They can't, Charlie said. They're very old and they haven't been out of bed for 20 years. Then we'll take the bed along with us. They can lay in it, said Mr. Wonka. There's plenty of room in this elevator for a bed. You couldn't get the bed out of the house, said Grandpa Joe. It won't go through the door. Oh, you mustn't despair, said Mr. Wonka. Nothing is impossible. You just watch. The elevator was now hovering over the roof of the Bucket's little home. What are you going to do? Said Charlie. Well, I'm going right on in to fetch them, said Mr. Wonka. How? Said Grandpa Joe. Through the roof, said Mr. Wonka, pressing another button. No! Wait, stop, said Grandpa Joe. Crash! Went the elevator right down through the roof of the house into the old people's bedroom. Showers of dust and broken tiles and bits of wood and cockroaches and spiders and bricks and cement went raining down on the 3 old ones who were lying in the bed, and each of them thought that the end of the world has come. Grandma Georgina fainted. Grandma Josephine dropped her false teeth. Grandpa George put his head under the blanket, and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket came rushing in from the next room. Save us! Cried Grandma Josephine. Calm yourself, my darling wife, said Grandpa Joe, stepping out of the elevator. It's only us. Mother, cried Charlie, rushing into Mrs. Bucket's arms. Mother, listen to what's happened. We're all going back to live in Mr. Wonka's factory, and we're going to help him to run it, and he's given it all to me, and... What are you talking about, my love? Said Mrs. Bucket. Oh, just look at our house, cried Mr. Bucket. It's in ruins. My dear sir, said Mr. Wonka, jumping forward and shaking Mr. Bucket's hand warmly. I'm so very glad to meet you. You mustn't worry about your house. From now on, you're never going to need it again anywhere. Who is this crazy man? Screamed Grandma Josephine. He could have killed us all. This, said Grandpa Joe, is Mr. Willy Wonka himself. It took quite a time for Grandpa Joe and Charlie to explain to everyone exactly what had been happening to them all day, and even then they all refused to ride back to the factory in that elevator. I'd rather die in my bed, said Grandma Josephine. So would I, said Grandma Georgina. I refuse to go, said Grandpa Joe. So Mr. Wonka and Grandpa Joe and Charlie, taking no notice of their screams, simply pushed the bed into the elevator. They pushed Mr. and Mrs. Bucket in after it. Then they got in themselves. Mr. Wonka pressed the button. The doors closed. Grandpa Georgina screamed, "Ah!" And the elevator rose up off the floor and shot through the hole in the roof up into the sky. Charlie climbed into the bed and tried to calm the three old people who were still petrified with fear. Please don't be frightened, he said. It's quite safe, and we're going to the most wonderful place in the whole world. Charlie's right, said Grandpa Joe. Will there be anything to eat when we get there? Asked Grandma Josephine. I'm starving. The whole family is starving. Anything to eat? Cried Charlie, laughing. Oh, you just wait and see. And that's the end. That's the end of an excellent book. Let me show you a couple of pictures here. This is the picture of the Great Glass Elevator coming through the roof there, the ceiling, into the old people's room. Everybody's freaking out. And then we have Charlie hugging his mom. We've got Mr. Wonka there, shaking Mr. Bucket's hand. We've got Grandpa Joe dancing around, trying to help Charlie explain the whole thing. And then we have the last picture. The perspective is standing in the Bucket's old house, looking up through the hole, watching the Great Glass Elevator soar up into the sky. What a great ending. Absolutely. Oh, what a great book. And again, it's sad to leave these characters. We have to put them to rest right now, but they're always with us. They're inside us. We can learn from great stories like this. We can learn lessons. And in stories, lessons are called themes. And there's a number of themes in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a number of lessons to learn. For one, good things come in small packages. Think about that. Roald Dahl, in his book, everything that's small seems to be packed with great energy. Look at Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka's small. He's not as small as an Oompa Loompa, but he's not like your average sized man. He's small, but he possesses great strength and great energy. Charlie, very small. So small that he has to hold on to Grandpa Joe's leg at times of seeming peril. But he is filled with goodness and compassion and kindness. The candy bars, just delicious, wonderful. Even the big one towards the end, the one the size of a mattress, got brought down. And when it was brought down, of course, it was still packed with wonderful deliciousness, And the opposite is true. You look at Augustus Gloop being a glutton. You look at Violet Beauregard blowing up into a blueberry. Poverty versus wealth is another theme. The poor versus rich people in this book. It shows that having a great deal of money doesn't always mean good stuff. I mean, Charlie and his family, they have nothing. They have nothing. They have pennies to live by. They eat cabbage soup, and sometimes that has to be watered down every single day. They live in a shack. They've got nothing, and yet Charlie has great dignity, and he has great goodness and great compassion and kindness, and he wants for nothing. And he's proud to be who he is, and he's proud of his family, even though they have nothing. And then you look at Veruca Salt. Look at her family. Veruca's father, Mr. Salt. Look at what the bad things he does with his money. He gets his daughter whenever she wants it. And he does that to shut her up because she pitches a fit every time she doesn't get what she wants. There's a phrase called "what goes around comes around." That basically means if it's almost like a karma thing. If you do something bad, something bad's going to come back to you. If you do something good is going to come back to you. Think about just the kids alone. Augustus Gloop, with his gluttony, he gets sucked up a pipe because of it. Veruca, because of her being spoiled, she's a bad nut. She's just a bad nut. Even squirrels knew that. Violet, she can't resist. It's almost like an addiction. She can't resist that gum, so she takes it, and look what happens to her. She gets turned into a blueberry and permanently blue face. Mike TV, obsessiveness. He's just impulsive and obsessive, and was. And, all these young people, they unfortunately ran into some bad things because they demonstrated bad stuff in them, It's how they were raised. The parents, they had to go through the bad stuff too. Bad stuff happened to them as well, to their children. But then you look at little Charlie. He did good, kind, compassionate, generous, and good things came to him. And in the end, he got the ultimate prize, and he got the whole factory. So stories like this can really help us and teach us lessons, and we can see, sometimes we can identify, we can see things. I can see myself in Charlie. As a teacher, I can see myself as Mr. Wonka. I like to say I can also see myself as Grandpa Joe, trying to be a mentor and a voice of reason, but at the same time, being unafraid to get excited, But I can also see myself as Charlie. I can, Well, that's it for that. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has come to an end. I don't know what book I'm going to read next. I don't know. There are millions upon millions to choose from. In the meantime, take care. Please stay safe. Do what your parents say. Don't be like any of the bad kids in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. If you can't get something, be patient. Work for it, or be patient to get it. If you're hungry, well, that's great. Don't stuff yourself full. Don't eat everything and not leave anything for anyone else. Don't become obsessive over things. You can use Violet's chewing gum addiction to being addicted, to video games or something. Every now and again, put that controller down and get a breath of fresh air. Do something creative with your hands. Do something outside, Give it a rest every now and again. And, with Mike TV, that can go along with that too. Don't be obsessed with things, Take good care. I guess what I should say is finish off with Charlie. Charlie's a good example. He's an exemplar of someone to be. And I think that's who most people are. Most people are Charlie, with a little bit of the rest in there. All of us have made mistakes and done little temper tantrums or taken something or become obsessed with something. But we learn. We grow and we learn. Take care. When you go out, get masked up. Keep your hands away from your eyes, nose, and mouth. And I wish you all the best from the bottom of my heart. Take good care. I'm going to go now. Bye-bye.